Hey everyone, it's DaAcorn, and for the past 5 months I've been stuck in a dank, zombie-infested mansion. So far I've been able to avoid being bitten, but I've also had no luck navigating this place. But I'll make it work. With my 2 survival knives and my 2 cranks, anything is possible. Unless I end up needing a 3rd crank, then we might be in trouble. Horror in video games. While my little kid brain was busy being spooked by a giant polar bear in Crash 2, some people were a little bit more preoccupied with the blossoming genre of survival horror. Yes, your eyes do not deceive you. Today I'm taking the dive into the Resident Evil series. Except I'm not starting with the original game. I'm instead going to be starting with the first game's remake, originally released in 2002 for the GameCube, later being ported to all modern consoles. Controversial as it may be to start here, I needed a little convincing to give this series a red-hot go, so a little bit more modernization goes a long way for me. I'm sure eventually I'll go back and play the PS1 classics, but for now, let's stick with this. So that lands us around... where did I say? 2002. Bit of background for the uninitiated. The original Resident Evil trilogy was a smash hit for PlayStation. The 3 games released went absolute gangbusters for Capcom, so naturally the other 2 tyrants at the time wanted a piece of the pie, and Capcom was mostly happy to deliver. Resident Evil 2 was impressively ported to the N64, which required the developers to cut down the monstrous 1.5GB game that was originally released on 2 discs, all the way down to the petite 64MB cartridge. So either Capcom has some real geniuses working for them, or somehow Billy Basso travelled back in time to show them how it's done. It's honestly a coin flip for me. Sega consoles also got their share of the RE franchise, but I'm gonna leave that story for another time. In Nintendo's case, they wanted more, so much so that they entered into somewhat of an exclusivity deal for the franchise. Faith fluctuated when it became clear that the 64 really wasn't gonna cut it, but when the GameCube was nearing the horizon, the future looked bright. 2 games that had already entered development were swiftly moved to the more powerful system, and eventually, after blood, sweat, blood, tears, and even more blood, a remake of the original Resident Evil was unleashed. This third-party game was and still remains a pretty amazing technical achievement and showcase for the GameCube's power. It absolutely legitimized the console as a game system not only for its ability to take advantage of the hardware it was on, but also broadened Nintendo's demographic image to include adult audiences. They didn't want to just be known as the platform that had cutesy kiddie games, with the bluest water known to man. They wanted some of that murky-ass zombie water as well. Eventually it would be remastered for modern consoles, well, modern for 2014 anyway, and that's the version you're seeing on your screens now. Yeah, they didn't really stay exclusive for too long. It was more of a sort of, but eventually not really situation. So this being my first exposure to the series, what did I think? It's absolutely awesome. So let's begin.
Resident Evil
1. Remake. HD. After selecting our difficulty, we get one of the toughest decisions for the game. Chris or Jill? For the most part, the game remains the same. Similar general progression, story, some characters are swapped out for others, and cutscenes do have differences because of it, but the biggest differences are in what they are both capable of in the game. Chris has more health, but Jill gets access to the grenade launcher. This is all trivial stuff though, if you're already planning on not getting hit. The real kicker is their inventory space. You'll be picking up various key items, weaponry, ammo, and healing, and that stuff can fill up quick. Chris has a measly 6 inventory spaces while Jill gets 8, and those 2 extra ones can make a huge difference, especially if you're on your first playthrough and aren't sure what items you should have on you at any given time. For that reason alone, I recommend playing as Jill for a first timer. Starting the game, we get some context to why these characters chose the Spencer Mansion as their holiday destination. An elite special division of the police force called STARS sent their Alpha team to go looking for their missing Bravo team. This leads them to the woods situated outside of a nearby Raccoon City. After finding their helicopter, the team is attacked by vicious, extra ravenous dogs. They run to the closest structure they find, and in the 5 seconds it took them to get in and close the door, Chris has already gone missing. I don't know why he would choose to break away from the pack, but for now he's nowhere to be found. Gunshots can be heard in a neighbouring room, and their captain, Albert Wesker, sends Jill to investigate. The original game was infamous for having some of the worst and yet funniest dialogue in a game. The remake definitely cleans it up a bit, but still leaves quite a big cheese factor behind, and I'm actually a big fan of it. The game itself and its subject matter is taken fairly seriously, but the characters and what they say is so matter-of-fact in a way that just makes me laugh.
I'm glad and all, but why are you here?
I just had something I wanted to check.
Like when Barry practically starts pre-writing a eulogy for Chris.
I'm going with her. Chris and I go back a long way.
Jill and Barry head into the dining room where they discover a pool of blood.
Blood.
Barry convinces Jill to explore further while he examines the blood. Walking down the next hallway, we come face to face with our first zombie. Killing zombies is an interesting debacle. Right now I don't have many bullets, and zombies can take anywhere between 1 and, well, much more than 1. This randomness can sometimes have you emptying your entire supply just to kill a single zombie. That's one of the reasons why it's so important to choose who's worth killing. I don't really want to deal with this one right now, so I'll just head back to Barry. He kills the zombie and we both go back into the main foyer area to meet up with Wesker. But now he's gone missing and they need to come up with a new plan. Barry takes the opportunity to go back to the blood puddle he loves so much, and we're left on our own. Checking some of the doors in the main hall, we can see that most of them are locked, needing a key themed after medieval objects. So our only course of action is to start looking wherever we have access to, and hopefully find some of those keys so we can open up more of the mansion. Back in the dining room, we find some ink ribbons and use them on the nearby typewriter. This will be our only way of saving in the game. Ink ribbons are a resource that get used up whenever we save, so yes, we have a finite amount of saves throughout the game. This can be described as fairly archaic and outdated, and you'd be totally right. I have no real reason to defend it, but it does add to that helpless feeling that there could genuinely be a time where you're all out of saves and you just have to keep moving forward, just hoping that soon enough you'll come across another ink ribbon. Ultimately, I do think it's a good thing that they eventually moved away from this type of saving, but the option does come up here and there for higher difficulties, so that feeling can be attained if you so choose. If we check our map, only rooms we've been to show up so far. If they're red, it means there's either an item to collect or something to do with an item in that room. If they're green, it's 100% done. Pretty simple to understand. This really helps when you feel like you've run out of stuff to try with whatever you have. It kind of thins out your options a bit, so you don't feel like you have the entire game to comb through every time you're looking for that one way to proceed. As we explore, we can find completed maps that'll fill out the rest of a given area, so we can see what rooms we haven't even entered yet. As you might have been able to tell, the remake keeps the fixed camera angles from the original. This allows for the game to look its best at all times, not only giving you a perfectly picked out angle, but allowing the backgrounds to be extra detailed, since you'll only ever see them as flat 2D images anyway. Tank controls were used in tandem with this so that forward was always forward for the character no matter the angle. The remake does keep the option for tank controls, but also adds the option for full analog support. Except it doesn't work quite the same as you'd initially expect. The controls will account for the specific angle you're at, and whenever the angle changes, unless you adjust the thumbsticks. Jill and Chris will keep moving the same way as they were previously. This helps you walk down straight corridors without having to adjust every time you get a new angle, but it can sometimes cause issues if you're trying to change your direction precisely where the camera changes. But for the most part, I still prefer the analog controls. Plus, if you want to save your bullets and avoid killing zombies, going in circles to bait out a zombie grab is the easiest way to get past one unscathed. If you do happen to get grabbed, but you're in possession of one of the few defensive items, you can use one of them to break free. The dagger and the taser both do damage, but Chris does get these grenades that can be used to kill a zombie when it blows. But these are not in very high supply, so using the bait out method to pass them will remain the cheapest method. It is, however, a lot harder to do with just the D-pad. Since we're on the topic of outdated design, every single time you enter another room, you are forced to watch a cutscene of the door opening. At first, it actually does kind of add to the whole experience, with the suspense of not knowing what you're going to see on the other side. But very quickly, when you start revisiting rooms you've seen plenty of, it starts to get old. Maybe if they only showed these cutscenes the first time you go through a specific door, or just have the option to turn them off completely, I'd feel better about it. But at the end of the day, it does kind of kill the pacing, particularly in subsequent playthroughs. However, this does mean that for the most part, enemies are segregated within their specific rooms, so if you're ever in a jam, simply leaving into a safer room can help. There are a few select moments where zombies can move from one room to another, and I couldn't figure out whether I was triggering it by doing something or whether it's by chance. Some rooms do have these types of events happen if you visit them more than once or you come through a certain door. Like this hallway. Coming from the direction of the main hall is completely safe, whereas if you enter from the other door, a couple dogs will smash through the windows and attack you. After passing a zombie that has graciously been pre-killed for us, we find an arrow that we're told we can examine to uncover its secrets. This style of examining items in our inventory kind of gives me that point and click adventure type vibes. I like it, but it does lead to you trying to interact with every single item in your possession if you ever get stuck with what to do. I'd like to admit that I knew when an item would be worth examining, but to be honest, on a first playthrough, you just don't know. Examining the arrow allows Jill to, I don't know, just kind of break it, leaving you with just the arrow tip. If you've already been around all the rooms you can at this point, including the secret door to the backyard, then you should know that this could get slotted into the gravestone out beside a couple zombies. Doing this opens a secret passage to a whole ass crypt. Here we can see some statues reserved for 4 masks. See no evil, speak no evil, smell no evil, and not doing a whole lot of anything. Exploring further, we find a book which, when examined, gives us the first key we need to explore more of the mansion, the sword key. Now the real hunt begins, not only as we're searching for any keys that'll unlock more areas, but hopefully we'll stumble across these masks so we can unlock the casket hanging chained in the air. Now I don't know why the hell that would be a thing Jill would want to do. Nothing suggests that doing this would result in anything good, but I guess she's in the position where it's try anything and hope for the best. After unlocking a few of the doors requiring the sword key, we gain access to one of the many safe rooms, a place that not only houses a typewriter for, as mentioned, saving capabilities, but an item box that we can use to store any items not needed at the present moment. We'll come across quite a few of these boxes throughout the game, and luckily for us, they warp through space to give us access to our belongings no matter what box we use. Think of how ender chests work in Minecraft. Thank God, because some of these boxes are far, far away from each other, and it would just be a pain to go all the way back to a specific one just to get a singular key item. Soon we'll come across a dog whistle, along with a note implying that our next item of interest is in the possession of one of those zombie dogs galloping around the mansion. Luckily, I know where to find one of these dogs, and maybe that wasn't such a good idea. You know, I would kill him, but I've kind of named him, and now I'm too attached to let go. So guys, meet Itchy. Since my health is a bit low, and I feel like this handgun isn't cutting it anymore, it's time to upgrade. As for healing, this game has the herb system. These plants that litter the halls of the mansion can heal any zombie bite. I guess a lot of these dead mansion goers didn't get the memo on that though. Especially this one who's sitting right in front of a few green ones. Green herbs on their own will heal you a bit, but you can combine them with more green herbs to heal even more, with 3 acting as a full heal. But to get the best bang for your buck, you'd prefer to save one green herb to combine it with a red herb. Red herbs will essentially boost the green one, becoming a full heal without having to use 3 whole green herbs, which, as you can tell, is a far more expensive way of healing. I quite like this method of healing, but mostly just because of the way the herbs interact with your inventory. Mixing them will obviously free up a space to carry something, and using them frees up even more. Sure, sometimes you may have to use them despite being at full health, but as it stands, it's one of the only things that you can use to manage your inventory on the fly, since the only way you can discard key items is when they've served their purpose, like when a key has unlocked all the doors it can. You could, I suppose, shoot a bunch of bullets to free up space, but that feels infinitely more wasteful than just using 1 or 2 herbs. I found that in normal difficulty, you find quite enough of them, and if you are getting to the point where you're using them just to free up space, you're doing pretty good in the damage department anyway, and can absolutely spare a couple. Now for the gun upgrades. There are a handful of weapons you can discover as we play the game, like the knife, which kinda sucks, but one of the best guns you can get fairly early on is the shotgun. You can find it suspiciously hanging on a wall, and after taking it, it triggers the room next door to start collapsing in on itself. If you're playing as Chris, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you're as good as dead. But luckily playing as Jill allows Barry to save us at the last second, letting us keep our newfound weapon. If you do happen to be playing as Chris and you really want the shotgun, you can find a broken shotgun on the other side of the mansion to replace with this one to stop the room from killing you. But it's just so much easier to let Barry save you instead. There are a few other weapons I'd like to mention, but I'll save that for when they become a little more relevant. Now back to finding our missing dog. If I paid attention to the image that came along with this note, I'd find out that I'm supposed to go use the dog whistle out in this veranda area, which doing so will call 2 dogs, one of them in possession of a collar that I want. I gotta say, it's a special type of evil to spawn 2 dogs in such an enclosed area as this. Especially since usually I would just run away from dogs, but since I have to stay and kill at least one of them, I risk dying to the other. Luckily, since I didn't name this dog, I have no problem demolishing it with my newfound shotgun. Getting the collar and examining it, we find out that it has an object hidden inside. A key. Shocking, I know. What's really shocking is that this isn't even a real key, just an imitation of one. But hopefully that sparks an idea to revisit a room we had access to all the way at the start of the game. Did that guy just get up? I'm sure that's just a glitch, nothing to worry about. Here we can swap the fake key for the real one and avoid dying to a trap set up to kill anyone with dangerously short patience. These are some of the puzzles I love most in the game, where the answer is pretty obvious, just as long as you've been paying the slightest bit of attention to things you couldn't get earlier in the game. It's simple, but I find it really effective and satisfying, like dominoes of solutions just naturally falling, while you get to tick room after room off your list. The real key we get is the armor key, which, you guessed it, gives us even more access to the mansion. This will be the one that leads us to most of the death masks. Before collecting any of those, however, we meet up with Richard, a member of Bravo team who has been injured by what can only be described as a giant zombie with fangs. He doesn't actually go into detail about what he was injured by, but now he's poisoned and needs a cure from a safe room on the other side of the mansion. Now we have to trek all the way back there just to grab a vial of serum and come all the way back before he dies. And yes, he can actually die, for good. If you take too long to get the serum, or for some reason you think Richard deserves his fate, coming back too late has him dead on the floor. But since I like to think of myself as Resident Good, we get the serum and get it to him on time. Now finally we can start hunting masks. The first is pretty much next door, where we solve a puzzle with these knight statues to get a jewelry box, which when examined contains a mask. Then we can grab this bag of chemicals outside and take it to this indoor green room where we can kill this overgrown vine and collect the mask behind it. I was morbidly curious to what would happen if I chose to shower the poison over the herbs here instead, and yeah, it destroys them. I don't know what I expected to happen, I'm still just kind of surprised. Next, we visit the piano room where we can play sheet music we discovered to unlock a door where we can use a rusted shield from the dining room to swap out with a golden one that we can put where the rusted one was to unlock the gearbox under the clock that when solving a puzzle gives us the shield key. Again, I just love how these key item quests turn out. The rusted shield is one of the first items we can pick up in the entire game and we didn't need to use it until now. Funny story, when I did my first file on Chris, I held the crest in my inventory for most of the mansion section since I had no idea when I'd need it. Mix that with the lack of inventory space, and you can imagine I had a bit of a tough time managing my items first go around. This time, I waited until I needed to pick it up, since the dining hall is on the way to the piano room anyway. This is another thing I love about this game. You know how New Game Plus files of games will let you carry over any upgrades or items you had in the previous, giving you a slightly different experience in a second playthrough? Well, I'd argue this is the best version of what a New Game Plus aims to do, except instead of having overpowered items, it's knowledge of the game that you can take with you, which can hugely cut down on game time. And it's kind of addicting to see how efficient you can make a run of this game. My first file ran me about 8 hours. By the time I'd platinumed the game on PlayStation, I'd cut that down to a personal best of 2 hours and 20 minutes, which in a way makes me embarrassed to think about all the time I wasted doing essentially nothing. But hey, it's all about the learning, alright? We can now use the shield key to confront whatever it was that injured Richard, and holy shit, that's a big snake. Running to the back of the room will net us our third death mask, and I didn't know it at the time, but you can just leave this room now. Nothing is stopping me from just leaving this snake and not bothering with the boss fight. But first, I'll need something from Richard, who heroically joins us to fight the snake. He, gets eaten, but Christmas comes early this year as he's left us with his assault shotgun. With more damage and higher ammo capacity, this is my favourite weapon in the game. Its strength is good, and ammo is in pretty healthy supply for this gun as well, using the same shells that the old shotgun did. You can easily glide through this game with just this gun. I just love it so much. From here, we can take a detour and go through the crow hallway, where after solving another puzzle, gives us our fourth and last death mask, as well as a shortcut to the backyard, where we can chuck our masks on the concrete statues and release a zombie, who clearly doesn't know how damaging UV rays can be. This incredibly red fella is known as Prototype 1, and is a version of something called a Crimson Head. If it's your first time playing this game, it's likely that at some point during your mask hunt, some of the zombies you've gunned down have begun to resurrect, looking redder and with the craziest untrimmed fingernails you've ever seen. That one outside the armor key room was our first, and acted as a warning that these guys are fast and deadly. Crimson Heads are unique to this game and this game alone, and kind of act as a bit of a middle finger to the players of the original game, scaring them all over again. But there is a way to prevent this. Using the lighter and kerosene found in the mansion, we can burn the bodies of downed zombies, preventing them from coming back. The fuel is limited, and it can be annoying to cart around 2 items just to stop Crimson Heads from spawning, but it's all part of the give and take dichotomy of killing. Another reason why you may avoid killing any zombies at all. I mean, which would you rather deal with? Chris gets the lighter by default, so it is technically a little easier for him to do this, but in contrast, Jill gets the lockpick, allowing her to open some doors without having to collect old keys hidden around. Chris still has to do that, which I'll remind you will take up one of his only 6 inventory spaces. Just another point to why Jill is best girl. Sometimes you'll get a critical hit on a zombie, which will destroy its head in one hit. This is another way to stop an unwanted Crimson Head resurrection. It's a little easier to get with higher damaging weapons, like using the shotgun and waiting for them to get close, just pointing it upward and potentially exploding their skull instantly. As mentioned earlier, Chris's defensive grenade also does this. After killing Prototype 1, we get this hexagonal key, which we can use to open the door to a side gate that finally gets us properly out of the mansion. Now we find out that Brad, Alpha Team's helicopter pilot, has been circling the airspace this entire time trying to make contact with us. Our radio basically only works one way though, so we really can't get any word to Brad that we are in fact still alive, just trapped. So I guess he'll have to continue floating up there. I just hope he has 8 hours of fuel left. I might be here a while. After some more travelling, we come across a cute cabin. Inside, we find a classic Resident Evil item, the crank. Before we can leave, however, we're knocked out by this cabin's resident. Evil. I mean Lisa. Yeah, it's Lisa. She's a little ticked, and rightfully so. I mean, we did just break into her house, so the right thing to do would be to surrender. But I'm too eager to use my newfound crank, so I book it back up to where I came from and plug this bad boy in to see what it does. So if I got this right, the crank has the ability to generate bad FMVs. Actually, on the topic of these pretty low quality cutscenes, since they seemingly weren't done in engine, they look pretty much as they did back in 2002, so I can't give them too much flack for it. I just think it's funny when we go from crisp HD to barely above 144p cutscenes. Now that we've lowered the Spencer swimming hole, we arrive at Residence, greeted by this absolute killer mood setting track. The soundtrack of this game definitely goes for an atmospheric feeling more than bombastic, and it is well worth it. There are a few more repeating tracks than I would have personally liked in certain areas, but most of them I'd listen to on repeat anyway, my favourite track being the one that's playing right now. The safe rooms also have a designated track, which captures the feeling of safety with an underlying feeling of dread, knowing that at some point you'll have to leave. One of the most effective parts of the soundtrack is, funnily enough, when it stops. It immediately puts you in a state of fight or flight, when you're just waiting for something to jump out and cue the scary music. And sometimes that doesn't even happen, but it doesn't stop you from being on edge. Residence itself has very few zombies in it, especially compared to the mansion, but at the moment it's under the rule of a living mass of vines called Plant 42. Beside the fact that I have to wrestle with the reality that there are somehow 41 more experimented plants out there that may or may not still be alive, it becomes increasingly clear that this one's gotta go, but not before I head into the pool room to grab a few games for a break. If anyone in the audience has arachnophobia, probably think you should give this game a miss. Further investigation of this place reveals a hidden laboratory down below, filled with what seem to be regular, if not slightly more aggressive great white sharks. Oh, and one gigantic supercharged one. If it wasn't obvious, the origin of all these monstrous animals, plants, and yes, the zombies, seems to be biologically engineered by the people who worked here. The T-virus, as we come to learn, is the culprit. Some way, somehow, it broke containment and led to the infection of all these creatures. Now, without anyone to get a handle of the situation, it's all kind of been left to grow and spread, contained to the Spencer estate. At least for now. If you're playing as Chris, this is actually another place where you can meet up with Richard. That's right, Bravo Team's Richard survives the yawn encounter and is alive and well. No! This is where Chris can finally get his assault shotgun. Another point for Jill as far as I'm concerned. For now, we press forward, collecting more keys to explore more of Residence before gaining access to the door leading to the lair of Plant 42. Here's another moment that differs depending on what character you're playing as. With Chris, you're forced to take on Plant 42 at its full health, whereas Jill is smart enough to do second grade math and create the V-jolt needed to kill the plant outright. That is, unless you let Richard die earlier on as Chris. Only then, Bravo Team's Rebecca, a character exclusive to Chris's playthrough, will be able to create the V-jolt herself, cutting down the plant's health in half. But you still need to finish it as Chris. You know, the more I learn about this Chris fella, the less I care for him. The differences go even deeper. Back in the mansion, Jill can play the piano straight up, while Chris pawns that job off to Rebecca, and you need to wait for her to practice the song. Now, I can give Chris a little bit of leeway for not knowing piano, but the V-jolt recipe is on the damn wall, dude. It's simple addition. How did this guy even get into stars? Plant 42 is definitely the boss I like to skip the most as as well. Its tentacle arms go everywhere, and unless you have a healthy amount of ammo, you're going to be knocked over a few times by them. After ridding residents of its overly resilient weed, we are awarded the helmet key, the last of the main mansion keys. So you know what that means. It's back to the mansion for some more exploring. I don't know how the helmet key made it all the way out here, but I'm not complaining. I personally love returning to previous areas with a new way to explore. The idea of some of these rooms just being under your nose, but you just lack the ability to get there, just makes the whole mansion feel more alive and thick with atmosphere, like it's a real place. Of course you needed the key to unlock more doors. That's what keys do. To think that if the STARS members just got a little more comfortable blowing the doors open with their shotguns, this game would be over in minutes. I guess they respect boundaries. It's what the B in STARS stands for. Now don't get too excited, but our return to the mansion comes with a couple pros. 1, Barry has left us a care package with more ammo and healing. 2, that dumbass door near the safe room that broke after 2 trips is now fixed. And 3, a ton of zombies previously alive or dead have now been despawned. The only con is that those zombies were taken out to make room for something a little scarier. Even at its gorgeous 20 by 20 pixels, this cutscene still kinda scares the shit out of me. Meet the Hunters. Imagine if the lizard from Spider-Man and a Crimson Head had 2 kids, and those 2 kids had a kid. This is that kid, and they have a whole lot of repressed anger over having auntie and uncle double as dad and mum. I don't know where the hell I'm supposed to believe these guys were hiding the whole game, but now a ton of them are roaming the mansion, and it's open season on Jill and Chris. For all I care, they can take Chris. Now that we're back here, we can clean off the remaining rooms left to unlock, and yes, deal with the Hunters. It only takes a couple of shotgun blasts to take them down, but left unattended and these guys will chase you down and do serious damage, even possibly killing you in one hit if you let them charge their special move. So best plan of action is to either take them out very precisely or have your running route planned in advance. But fortunately we don't have to be back in this place for much longer. We grab a couple books, a battery, a hexagonal frame, and have a rematch with Yawn the Snake. Then we can sprint to the nearby cave system. We meet up with Enrico, another member of the Bravo team who was quickly shot dead by a mystery man who Jill doesn't seem eager to chase. Probably because she's more excited for our next item. Our second crank. Yeah, Crank 2, the sequel. And this crank is a fairly large upgrade over the original. For example, it can do this. And that's basically it. Barry decides to join us deeper into the caves as we reunite with Lisa. Ah, no, did I do it again? Are these your caves, Lisa? I've accidentally home invaded you twice and, you know, I just feel terrible about it. We try to leave her alone, but Barry ditches us down here, probably to go back to that blood puddle in the dining room. So we're forced to deal with Lisa for now. Using a broken flamethrower as a paperweight, because of course we do, we can leave from behind her and make our way through the back entrance. We wade through a small indoor river filled with snakes, and for 1 second I just want to vent about these snakes. Well, not these specific ones, but these ones right here. Is it just me, or do you just always get poisoned on your way back through here? Poison is kind of a special case to deal with when it comes to healing. Being poisoned will slowly drain your health unless you use a unique blue herb that just so happens to be found around locations where you can get poisoned. You can also mix these with other herbs, but it won't do anything extra in this game other than cure poison no matter which herb you mix it with. But yeah, screw these snakes in particular. We learn a little bit more about our friend Lisa Trevor. She was the daughter of the architect who designed the mansion. Sadly, through some heavy manipulation from what we now know as Umbrella Pharmaceuticals, she ended up being used as a test subject for many of the company's biological agents, eventually mutating and making her an unstoppable monster. She would then go on to crawl the tunnels of the mansion grounds, searching for her mother, stealing the faces of anyone who got in her way, including anyone she deemed a fake mother. So it turns out I was right to feel bad. Lisa is as much a victim as one can be. We also gain possession of the last hexagonal crest that we can combine with the frame we got earlier, and on our way back into the mansion, take back the first one we got from Prototype 1. Now we can enter a pair of doors that stood under the main foyer, taunting us from the very start of the game. Turns out Barry beat us here, no explanation to what route he possibly could have taken. Actually, same goes for Lisa. She knows the halls better than we do though. Barry surprisingly turns on us, trying to point his gun at me, but Jill pulls a fast one and turns it back on him. Did I say surprising? My bad. I meant to say glaringly obvious. Throughout the game, Barry has been incredibly suspicious. Oh, and of course there was that little ditching me in the deep dark caves debacle. And now Jill wants answers, but not until we have a showdown with Lisa. We do get the choice to either return Barry's gun to him or allow him to go unarmed. If we refuse to return it, Barry can die here and stay dead for the rest of the game. One of the handful of differing narratives that can result from our choices. It doesn't really end up meaning too much other than giving us a slightly different ending, so let's play nice and give it back to him. To beat Lisa, all we need to do is lift the top of the coffin in the middle of this room. It seems that Lisa's true mother lies inside, and revealing it to Lisa essentially completes her only mission in life. Sadly, with not much more to live for, she leaps into the depths below. It's quite sad, but at least she won't be in pain anymore. Now we arrive at the final area of the game, the labs, because that previous area under Residence was more of an experimental zoo. This place is the real deal. We get to discover even more horrifically crazy stuff that Umbrella has been working on. We even have a nicely formatted slideshow showcasing all the nasty stuff we've come across. And hey, doesn't that guy kind of look like Wesker? I can't believe they let him wear sunnies in the lab. Our aim in this area is to unlock access to an elevator that for the moment has been shut down. The console to turn it on for some reason runs on fuel, which the canister for holding it is currently empty. So we need to fill up this canister on the other side of the lab and run it back to its place in the boiler room, but not so fast. Literally. While holding the full fuel canister, you cannot run and you cannot attack or be attacked, or you risk being blown up by the disrupted fuel. Technically, you can do a little bit of those things if you get lucky or are very careful, but the margin for error is a little too risky for me to bother trying any of it. My only tip for you guys is to make sure the enemies that you know will be on your journey back are taken care of, otherwise they will get in your way. Enemies like the Chimera, these wacky humanoid bug creatures that can get a little annoying in higher numbers, but they really aren't that hard to defeat, especially if you still have access to your assault shotgun or the highest damaging weapon in the game, the Magnum. Doing an optional room in the mansion will give you the Wind Crest, which if inserted into a gravestone outside will give you 3 more crests. If examined and put into the gravestone next door, will bestow upon you the Magnum. Ammo is fairly scarce for this gun, but now that we're in the lab, we can put it to its best use. Most enemies will go down in one hit to this, and regular zombies will have their head blown off, which is great, because there's nothing worse than starting the fuel run I mentioned earlier and having a Crimson Head make an unscheduled visit. There is a secondary mission we can do while in the labs as well. 3 items called MO discs can be found and used on 3 hidden terminals around the area. These will unlock a cell that houses a familiar face. If you're lazy, we can just completely ignore this. It is optional after all, but look, even though I do kinda hate Chris and his lackluster skills as a STARS member, I would just feel a little bad if I left him behind. Before freeing him from his cell, however, we get the elevator working and head down into the last undiscovered room in the lab. Here it's revealed that Wesker has been behind basically everything all along. One big test to see how these monsters, these bioweapons, would fare against trained professionals. The final test is against a giant hulking creature known as the Tyrant. Wesker awakens the specimen, and to thank its savior, it gives him a hearty high five.
Premature.
Don't get too pissed, Wesker. You don't even want to know about the handshake Tyrant tried to give you in Chris's storyline. Barry also gets knocked down, and we end up stuck in a very confined space with the monster. This is another example of how the lack of information helps to fuel the horror in this game. Enemies don't have any health bars, and sometimes there isn't even much of an indication that you're doing any meaningful damage. Some would despise this choice, but I think it does wonders to make you feel absolutely helpless, and as if the odds are stacked against you. If you save up a few Magnum rounds though, yeah, not so tough after all. So it turns out Barry was only helping Wesker under threat of his family, so we're all chill now. He follows us out, and we duck in to save Chris from his cell, and now the whole lab is going to self-destruct and kill us all if we don't get out of here right now. We head up the elevator to the terribly convenient helipad and shoot a flare up to call Brad, who I hope never lost faith that we were somehow okay. Before we can ride the chopper out, however, the Tyrant digs his way from underground to get the last word in. If we can just survive a little longer with this brute, Brad will drop us a weapon that no creature could survive, the rocket launcher. Shooting this at the Tyrant should defeat it. There, dead for good, I think. Finally, as the 3 of us make haste on the chopper, we see the entire mansion blown to smithereens, and we can sigh in relief that we weren't included in the rubble. Resident Evil 1 was an amazing experience, and I fully credit it as being my true introduction to the survival horror genre as a whole. Finishing one playthrough isn't the end though. As I said, playing as Chris does shake up the gameplay a bit, as well as playing on higher difficulties. It even has extra modes to spice things up. Real Survivor is one of them, and this isn't for the faint of heart. This mode has you locked on hard difficulty, but it also disconnects all those safe boxes from one another, meaning you have to be extra thoughtful about what you take and what you leave behind. It also turns the aiming completely manual. I saved saved mentioning the aim controls until now because, to be honest, during a regular playthrough, it's pretty brain dead. The game isn't trying to be a third-person shooter, so aiming will always lock onto the closest enemy. But in Real Survivor, you need to adjust that shit yourself, which does make it a little more tense, especially when you're dealing with faster enemies like the hunters. There is another mode called Invisible Enemies, in which, you guessed it, every enemy in the game is unseeable. This definitely feels a lot more gimmicky than an actual thought-out mode, but I do like how it tests your knowledge on each room and what enemies to expect in each. That ended up being the playthrough I got the platinum on, getting one for doing the mode in the first place, but also getting the no saving trophy as well. And I gotta tell ya, even on easy, that entire run had me sweating, knowing that one bad move around a hunter meant an instant death, and a trip all the way back to the start. The short runtime of the game I think is one of its greatest strengths as well. A first playthrough when knowledge is scarce is sure to be a respectable 5+ hours on average at least, with following playthroughs beating that easily. It makes replays feel all the more satisfying and surprisingly addictive. This type of resource management, navigational puzzle box of a game just feels so good to beat faster and faster. Though some aspects like the fixed camera angles and less than gracious gameplay choices will be criticized for being outdated, I personally still think that this is not only a great starting point for new Resi players, but for survival horror players in general. I can attest to it. The original game served as the foundation for many games that followed, and its remake just beefs that experience up for modern players. It sets the bar high, but in such a way that you can appreciate when other games are building off of it. I love this game so much, and I can't wait to talk about its sequel, Resident Evil 2, a remake that released 17 years after this one. Like and subscribe to get 2 more inventory spaces, and leave a comment on your thoughts on Chris Redfield. I'm sure we can all have a spirited discussion about him. And as always, I'd like to thank you for watching DaAcorn.